The trade deadline has come and gone. The Mets were fairly active. They didn't go big fish shopping, but a plethora of moves to be excited about. We enter the month of August. The Mets coming off a series win over the Twins, just a half game out of that wild card spot. Let's break it all down on this episode as we will be joined by Mets YouTuber. It's Wardy. Tyler Ward joins us once again. We'll talk trade deadline. We'll talk Mets Twins and look ahead to a big West Coast trip. It's all coming up next on the Sick Podcast, Mets Magic.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Mets Magic with Jake Brown.
And it's in there, strike three called. The Mets win the pennant. The New York Mets have won the National League pennant. Put it in the books. The New York Mets, for the first time in 15 years, are champions of the National League.
The sickest New York Mets podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Welcome back to the Sick Podcast, Mets Magic. I'm your host, Jake Brown, at Jake Brown Radio is where you find me. Subscribe to the Sick Podcast, Mets Magic on YouTube. Smash that thumbs up if you're watching right now. Comment below. What'd you think of the Mets trade deadline? How you feeling as we enter the month of August about the final 2 months of the season? Of course, if you're watching, you also see me rocking the Homage shirt. Go to the link in the description. Make sure you get your shirt at Homage. This thing is comfy. It is elite. It's silky smooth. I got the Mets hoodie. I got the Mets shirt. It's got the Shea Stadium throwback on here. So make sure as you see the Shea or the Shea Stadium, got a lot of compliments on that. So go to that link in the description to get your gear from Homage. We are paying homage to David Stearns and the New York Mets as the trade deadline passed on Tuesday. And now the Mets didn't get Jack Flaherty. They didn't get Tanner Scott. They didn't get, Michael Kopech. They didn't get some of these bigger names that were out there. But David Stearns managed to get some good players without giving up a single top 20 prospect. And he saw the market and he saw how big of a price all these players were going for. And he said, I'm not going to mortgage the future, but I'm going to make the roster better. And I'm going to do it without making a single move that in a year you'll be like, in a year, you're not going to say, damn it, Ryland Thomas is killing it because you never heard of him before this deal. In a year, you're not going to say, damn it, why did we trade Cade Morris? Why did we trade Wilfredo Lara? Why did we trade Paul Gervais? But in a year or two, the Padres might be saying, hey, why did we trade our number 3, 4, 6, and 29th prospect for 2 months of Tanner Scott? Was that the right move? We'll find out. They win a World Series. They won't care about any of those prospects. But they might regret it. The Mets have nothing to regret from this deadline. They go out and win 2 out of 3 over the Twins and even split with the Marlins, sweep the Yankees, split Braves, 2 out of 3 Twins. The teams around them are playing so well that they are not in a wild card spot right now. They're half game out. The Padres 9-1 in the last 10. D-back 7-3 in the last 10. The Braves are hanging afloat 4-6 in the last 10, still in that top spot. And we'll go over, what these teams did and how it compares to the Mets. The Cardinals hanging around, a game behind the Mets at 4 over. The Mets 57-51, 54 games remaining. And we enter August. And it's time to buckle up and lock in. This team is primed for a run. Let's talk about all these moves with our guest. You see him on YouTube all the time. It's Mets YouTuber. He does the post-game shows. He is a happy dad, so as you watch on YouTube, he is allowed to wear the happy dad hat. I wear it almost every other day, but I'm just a happy dad drinker, not actually a happy father. Tyler Ward, at Wardy NYM on Twitter, and subscribe to his YouTube. Figured I'd have you on, always good to catch up with you. And also, I was getting a lot of FaceTime on your post-game Friday. I was at the game with the OMG sign, and I felt like an angry dad with the back pain I was feeling the next morning. That thing had to be 30 pounds. It felt like a good dumbbell trip to the gym, and I was getting my workout in, but I had to pop a few Advil to make sure my back was okay. Welcome back, Wardy.
Oh, thank you so much for the invite. I appreciate it. And it was funny because when I had you in my post game, that wasn't intentional at first. I was just editing the highlights as I typically do, and then as the show was starting, I like looked and I was like, "Oh, that's Jake. He's just left in the sign. Perfect. Love this." So you just got a nice little cameo in the entire show a couple days ago, which was great because vibes were riding high in Mets land. I think that was a perfect time for you to be featured in those highlights because everything going right with the Mets right now. And yes, they did drop their series finale against the Twins that we'll get into, but still very much another strong month of baseball. Too strong now. 17-10 in the month of July. Not too much to complain about if you're David Stearns on the Mets.
Yeah, and you just got to win series. Unfortunately, everyone else is winning around them. At some point,
Right.
you expect them to come down to earth. In the past, it was everyone is losing around you, and that's what gave the Mets the shot to go back. Unfortunately, now everyone's winning. But it's going to level out at some point. And let's before we get into the Twin series, let's break down, Wardy, trade by trade, what we think. I know it's a little late here, but the Mets are off today. They have a big West Coast trip, 3 in the Angels, that weird 1 makeup in St. Louis, which is now a big game in the wild card, 3 in Colorado, and then 3 in Seattle, which is Sunday night baseball in Seattle, which is kind of odd that Mets Mariners ends up being a primetime game. But hey, both teams are in a playoff race. Let's start with the buzzer beater trade and the one that did get us excited. We saw a lot of names move. I mentioned Tanner Scott. Morty, that price was just too high. I think I always wanted Tanner Scott. Listen, I'm always going to support, a good pitcher who's also bald and bearded like I am, but to give away that much, I mean, that's essentially the Mets probably giving away a Clifford in that deal. And, Mets fans would be fuming if they give away a Jet Williams, a Clifford, and Acuna and more to get a 2-month rental. Let's start with that before we get into Brazoban. What do you think of Tanner Scott, that return, and the Mets deciding to not give it all up for him?
Oh, I mean, that was just pretty obvious, right? David Stearns was never interested in giving up key assets for rental players, especially. And Tanner Scott, if he didn't have as much of a hot market as he did, maybe the Mets would have found themselves more involved there. But given how inflated the pitching market was leading up to the MLB trade deadline, and no one profiling the way Tanner Scott did as a flame-throwing setup or closer option for you out of the bullpen, I mean, it was pretty obvious that there was going to be a bidding war, and AJ Preller is absolutely the type of guy to gut the farm for immediate help, especially after losing Peter Seidler, sadly, over this past year. There's now a heavier point of emphasis than ever for this Padres team to try to win, especially in his honor. That's why Seidler went out of his way to spend as big as he did the past couple years. And while they had to part ways with Juan Soto because the fit just wasn't right and they had some financial constraints there long term, they still really rectified their bullpen that we saw the trade deadline. And I love what the Padres did, but I hate what they gave up in order for that to happen. That's something that we cannot expect with David Stearns whatsoever, and for good reason, because the players that we're about to talk about, I assure you, are going to have some strong production for the Mets. Maybe not to the degree of Tanner Scott, but certainly I think we will at least match the degree of Jason Adam that they also acquired from the Rays, that they gave up a haul for. Dylan Lesko, top prospect, among others. Like, the Padres have been doing this for the past couple years, and they have a bigger desperation to win now more than the Mets when you look at their current construction of their roster. So I see where they're coming from there, but I absolutely also see why the Mets weren't even going to go remotely close to the price point that I took for the Padres to land both Scott, Adam, and everyone else that they acquired.
Yeah, the Padres, the other team in this wildcard race that went pitching heavy like the Mets did, with Scott, Adam, Brian Hoeing, and Martin Perez. Martin Perez, a fringe starting pitcher, really a 4 or 5, maybe a bit of an upgrade from Blackburn, who the Mets got, but they gave up a lot to not get, outside of Scott, a massive haul. Let's start with the deadline buzzer beater deal here. The Mets, in the last, what was it, like 5:30, I feel like, or 5:40, we see the tweet. They require Huascar Brazoban. And Brazoban is a very interesting story, as you see watching on YouTube, flashing the tweet from our guy James Shiano. 34 years old. This guy was in the minors for almost a decade. Indie ball, worked his way up. He was in the Dominican League. He was in the Atlantic League. Hits 96, throws a ton of cutters, 4 pitchers to each side of the plate. It is a fine get, because what they give up? They gave up Wilfredo Lara, and Wilfredo Lara is a guy who's been in A-ball for 4 years now. He's only 20, so he started at 16, 17 years old, a name that was on nobody's radar. And, you look at Tanner Scott and the comparisons to these other relievers and what was given up. The Mets gave up, a high A prospect, a 20-year-old that will probably never see the big leagues. Well, hopefully he does, at least with the Mets. And they get a reliever here who's been one of the best in baseball. 2.93 ERA, 34 strikeouts in 30 2/3. Wardy, 20 games, which tells you he can give you an inning, 2 innings at times, which this Mets bullpen needs. He could strike guys out. He's under team control through 2028. Obviously, it's a strange situation because he's under team control, but he's 34 years old, which I've never heard of in the history of the sport. But listen, if he's pitching this well in his mid-30s, who says until he's 38 he's not going to be this good? He is at his prime at a later age than usual. This was a steal and a big move for the back end of the Mets bullpen.
To share some context as to how lopsided this trade may actually have been, I don't know if you guys are aware of baseball trade values. Some people love them, some people hate them. It's a website that people utilize to try to figure out how to do their own mock trades, especially as fans. And sometimes they're 100% to a T what actually happens in real life in MLB. And sometimes they're pretty far off from the trades that happen. But for what it's worth, they did come out and say that they weren't even able to properly put in what the balance was going to be from Miami to the Mets because of how lopsided it was for the Mets. It was one of the rare hiccups that they had that they announced on socials as the trade happened because they were taken back by what David Stearns gave up in Lara, who again is, a top 30 prospect for the Mets, for a Huascar Brazoban, who no one talks about because of the age, the uniqueness about him and his contract. And this is just such a slam dunk for David Stearns. You get a controllable reliever for multiple years. And the best part is if Brazoban decides that he's not going to be a good reliever at any point, then you just cut ties with him because you're not like, oh no, we gave up so much to acquire him. We paid him big time this past offseason. None of those things are the case here with Brazoban, who continues to get better each and every season. A couple things I want to highlight with him are the following. One, when you look at the start of his career a couple years ago to now, the walk rate continues to get better. He's now just right around 3 walks per 9 this season, which is much better than 5+ that we've seen in years prior. He's at right around a 9 to 10 K per 9, which has been fantastic. So a good K to walk ratio there. The expected numbers, the ERA is nice, but the expected ERA is 2.4 or so. So what that tells you is what he can actually control as a pitcher outside of the defense around him. Like the most important stats is that he's actually superior than his baseline ERA. Then if you go on Baseball Savant, we love to see all those pretty numbers. All the red is what we want to see. No blue. Blue means you're bad. Red means you're good, simply put. You look at Huascar Brazoban's Baseball Savant page. He's in the 80th and 90th plus percentile in almost every single statistic. He has been absolutely nails this season. He touches 99. He had a fantastic debut that we saw in the Mets series finale against the Twins, utilizing all those pitches from the cutter, changeup, sinker, and four seam. This is pretty much exactly what so many teams were looking for in a flame-throwing setup man option at the traded line. But for some reason, David Stearns just knew where to look, where it seemed like maybe very few teams were looking with Miami. They were all eyeing Tanner Scott, not so much Huascar Brazoban. And I think that's where David was able to pounce and take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, it's a steal. And I shouldn't say Wilfredo won't make the big leagues ever. That was mean. He won't make it with the Mets. He will make it somewhere else, and he's still so young that he's got a shot here.
That was his villain arc. I hope you know that, Jake. Like, he just started it. He's going to come back, and he's going to be like what Daniel Murphy was when he was with the Nationals against us. Just wait.
Well, listen, I saw Danny Murphy at spring training when he had no name on his back. I remember going to Port St. Lucie, and I'm like, who is this number 88 with no name on the back? And I fell in love with the guy at that moment. I was like, this unknown is going to be good. That might be Wilfredo. We wish him the best of luck. It won't be here. What a steal. Now, the next move, wasn't as exciting, and that's Paul Blackburn. Now, Paul Blackburn is essentially an upgraded Adrian Hauser, if you want to say that. He's essentially Adrian Hauser, but a little bit better. They exchanged right-hand pitcher Cade Morris, was around, I believe, the 25th Mets prospect at the time they traded him. He was a third-round pick in 2023, was having a decent year in high A, but once again, you did not give up anything major. You got yourself a depth piece. Blackburn could play well at Citi Field. He comes from Oakland, which is obviously a pitcher's park, so that might have inflated his numbers a little bit. Had a few months he was hurt. He's had a few dominant starts earlier in the season where he had 7-inning shutouts. The injury, affected some of his numbers of recent. I think he could be a good fifth starter. I think it's good that he's also, a righty. The Mets rotation now, Wardy, is very left-hand heavy with 3 lefties. It's good to bring a righty in there. He's not going to light it up, but your hope is that he eats innings, gives you 6 innings, 3 runs. If he could do that as a number 5, this isn't a steal. This isn't not a steal. It's a very, it's an arm. We'll take it. and we hope he gives you quality starts.
Yeah, this is like a lighter degree of the trade the Mets did a couple years ago for Chris Bassett, right? For Adam Oller. That's essentially what they did again here with the Oakland A's, getting a starter that's blossomed with them the past couple years. And again, had that foot fracture, which is why he's only pitched in 9 starts, makes his Metropolitan debut on the bump against the Angels this Friday as they kick off their 10-game homestand. That not homestand, away stand that we'll get into shortly. But as you mentioned, Blackburn, yeah, he is that Hauser replacement, essentially, an upgrade, a more surefire guarantee thing over guys like Tyler McGill, Joey Lucchesi, and he can provide length for you, which I think is a very important thing, right? Outside of Luis Severino, the Mets have really fluctuated in length that they've gone this year, more so earlier in the year than as of late. Jose Quintana and Sean Manaea have definitely held their own, which has been great to see. But if we take a look at the collective whole of 2024, the Mets have had a lot of starts where 5-and-die pitchers, and it's important to get those guys to give you innings, but also hopefully do it at a quality rate. Now, Blackburn, as your number 5 starter, he's going to throw the kitchen sink at you, right? So he's going to give you his 4-seam say 92, cutter 89, slider 82, changeup 86, curveball 80, sinker 91. And his main goal is to induce those ground ball outs as a soft tosser, just like Adrian Hauser. And I think where he's going to find more success than what Adrian did is kind of not only the mentality heading into now entering with the Mets here, but also just how the fit is going to be for Blackburn, who thankfully also has a fellow friend in Sean Manaea during their time in Oakland with the team. So that'll help him get adjusted a little bit, I'm sure. Having Francisco Alvarez as one of your catchers certainly doesn't hurt. And Luis Torrens, too. Let's not sleep on the best backup catcher in Major League Baseball right now, seriously. But Blackburn, yeah, simply put, he's going to try to eat 5+ innings for you every 5th day out there. And hopefully for the Mets, they can just get some consistency in the meantime as Christian Scott works back, as he was shut down for a couple weeks. And then Kodai Senga's out for the remainder of the regular season. But we don't know what's going to happen come postseason time should the Mets find themselves in that position.
Yeah, and that's why they made this move was Friday. I was there at the sign in the middle of the game. Boom, the injury happens. You were there Thursday, vibes electric. Thursday, vibes electric. Friday, outside of the injury, the place got quiet, and that is a season-changing injury. Your hope is if you get in, he can still be your game 1 starter, because the other side of it was he looked great, 9 strikeouts. He probably could have went 7 innings. They probably would have pulled him after 6, but in the middle of the 6, on a play where he had, nothing to do with it, he was just running off of the mound, trying to get away from the pop-up, the high-grade calf strain. Do you know, is there a Dr. Wardy on the show today? Do you know anything about high-grade calf strains? And are you confident that maybe we see him come playoff time if they make it?
Well, I can tell you this, grade 1 of a calf strain is going to have you out multiple weeks, as is. Now we're at high grade. So, there's a reason why they shut him down. He has to rest up first and foremost, make sure that heals, and then begin the slow rehab process. So the upside about this situation is that this isn't a mechanical issue. Kind of similar, I shouldn't say kind of similar to Edwin, because Edwin had a tear and that was a big deal with his planting foot and everything. But still, when it comes to Senga, making sure that this is an injury that doesn't have to do with his elbow, his shoulder is very important. So that's at least the glass half full approach with this. Now, can he return to the Mets should they crack postseason play? Well, essentially, yes. If he gets the proper rest and ramps up, for sure. But it's crazy to say that there could be a world where the Mets may consider Kodai Senga, who's only pitched 5.1 innings the entire 2024 season, to now kick off maybe your wild card start, or, maybe game 2 or game 3 if you get to the next round. It's a crazy thing to fathom. However, I guarantee that's what the Mets are hoping for right now, because even though it was such a little limited sample size, Kodai Senga proved once again exactly what you will be getting from him when he returns. Yes, he's not going to be sharp every single time out there. No one is. But 9 out of 10 times, you know what you're getting from Kodai Senga, and that alone is the best option that the Mets currently have in their rotation. So you absolutely need to try to seek that and have that happen should the Mets crack playoffs.
He's by far the best starter, and it's unfortunate that the price and everyone else was so high, because a lot of us were big fish shopping, hoping for a Jack Flaherty, hoping for one of these other names out there. But you saw the return Flaherty and some of these other guys got, and the Mets weren't going to go that far. David Stearns clearly didn't want to mortgage 2025 and beyond to get a starter for a few months, whether it was a rental. There wasn't really a lot of guys under team control that, Blake Snell was the guy, but then again, that's the Mets luxury tax. Blake Snell, a $30 million guy, $30 million a year guy, becomes a $40+ million a year guy because of the 110% tax. So it becomes too massive to have gone for someone else. So my worry is it took him forever to essentially ramp up to get to this point. he would have to ramp up quickly late September. The season ends early too. It's end of September. This isn't like an October 2nd, October 3rd end of the regular season. October 2nd, 3rd is, when the playoffs begin. I forget the actual date, but it's a little bit earlier than usual, which also hurts the Mets here. So I don't know if he's going to be able to ramp up that quickly. We heard the whole thing of he knows his body better than anyone else.
Right.
And we don't know what was going on, but he took a little bit extra time than I think what all of us thought. We don't know what was going on. But again, that is an arm injury. We'll see if a leg injury is different for Kodai Senga. They need him back. But we'll see also the Mets experiment. I don't think they should go 6-man rotation. I know they're watching Severino's innings. I just don't think they have enough arms. Tyler McGill has just been way too inconsistent to keep throwing him out there 5 days. He came in relief on Wednesday, so it seems like that plan for now will be shut down. The bullpen has got better, Wardy. Sean Reed-Foley, threw a rehab inning, 3 strikeouts last night. Look at this bullpen when they're at full strength. Reed Garrett is on his way back. He's likely going to start rehabbing this weekend. They get Phil Maton. They get Ryan Stanek, who I want to talk about in a second as well. Do you move Jose Butto to the rotation here? I know he's lights out as a multi-inning bullpen guy, but if your bullpen's at full strength and you have all those guys, do you put Butto in the rotation?
You do what is ever best for the team at the time. So if the bullpen looks like it's handling itself and they have multiple of those multi-inning eaters and Nunez and Sean Reed-Foley, and to a degree Garrett. However, I'm sure that they're going to go back on his innings now because they utilized him way too much in the first half. Quite literally almost completely tore off his elbow, it felt like. But yeah, Butto's one of those guys I think is perfect in his current role. I have concerns on his ability to give the Mets length as a starter. However, I can't be a hypocrite here because I'm the same guy who felt somewhat similar with Seth Lugo, and Lugo has been able to adapt and evolve since leaving the Mets and being more of a surefire starter going deep in the game. So I'm going to view that somewhat similar to Butto, where if the Mets do go back to him as a full-time starter, there's definitely upside there. I think when it comes to what he gives you among current Mets starters, he is certainly a better option that you could argue over a Paul Blackburn and potentially over a David Pearson, among others. But where I have a big problem again is that length. And if Butto is going to be nothing more than a 5 and dive for you, and if he's not going to give you much more than what Paul Blackburn currently is, then how much does it really warrant for you to go out of your way to take him out of the bullpen? That is the big question. Really, how is Blackburn going to look in his first start with the Mets? And we're going to kind of go from there, right? I think that's how Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns are, the same way that they have all season long. And that's, I think, something that both you and I can appreciate about this current regime versus years past. They don't sit on their hands too long, thankfully. Outside of waiting maybe a month plus too long to part ways with a Jay Diekman, for example. I mean, this is the same Mets team that had Joey Wendell, Zach Shore, just to name a few on their roster this year, all the DFAs that they did in the bullpen. So they're a very proactive ball club under David Stearns, and they know that if someone is not going to be working the way that Adrian Hauser wasn't, that he's officially been released by the Mets now, they're going to have that same approach with Blackburn and others in said rotation. So how Paul does will directly go in hand with what happens with Butto.
Yeah, if Paul gives you quality starts, you go with these 5 guys. Peterson is due to, I feel like, turn it around in a bad way. I feel like he's been over the top good, and from what we've seen in his career, he's not this good for this long. But, maybe we're wrong. Maybe this hip surgery changed him. He's going to be this good the whole way, and the Mets could really use it. Hopefully, Jose Quintana stays pitching well, gives you 6 innings, 2-run kind of ball, like he did in that blowout. I was there on Monday in the Francisco Lindor streetwear bobblehead. I wish I had it. I wanted to do an unboxing. I left it in the other room. But, these guys just got to keep giving you innings. Let's quickly wrap up the trade recap, talk about the other guys they got. Reliever Tyler Zuber for Paul Gervais. Now, I can't tell you I know much, Wardy, about Tyler Zuber. Ty Adcock was also designated for assignment. The Mets ended up releasing him with Adrian Hauser. 1 run, 3 1/3 with the Rays, 2.70 ERA. Has had a cup of coffee for multiple years in the big leagues, 5.13 ERA, 56 appearances. He'll start off in AAA. This seems like another depth move in case there is another injury down the pipeline. And David Stearns, you got to give this guy credit. He has been incredible addressing, roster spots 26 through 40. The guys who might be on the way. The Jose Iglesias gets the call up. These minor league arms who get the call up and step in at a pinch. The Daniel Nunez of the world. These kind of guys, he has been fantastic at finding, bringing them up. And this is what he's done well in other places. He's addressed 1 through 40 really well, a lot better than Billy Epler, a lot better than Sandy Alderson. And this seems to be one of those kind of moves.
Yeah, we talked about how Brazoban's a fascinating story as a guy who was in indie ball for a while, right? And the same holds true to a lesser degree here with Tyler Zuber. He started the year pitching for the Long Island Ducks in indie ball, and he was looking fantastic. And the Rays scouts were there and like, oh, this guy's got stuff. Let's sign him. Let's bring him in. Pitches a couple innings, and what we see in those couple innings is the following. He has a 114 stuff plus on his fourth seam, and all of the numbers I'm about to relay are courtesy of a good friend of mine and a pitching contributor on my channel, Isaac Rothman. He's a young stud of a little pitching analysis. He gives me all the advanced information, stuff that, you normally wouldn't find when we just typically talk about pitching, but 114 stuff plus on his four seam, which means he's 14% better than the average pitcher in baseball with that pitch. He tops out 98 miles per hour, just for some context. 137 stuff plus on his sweeper, 37% better than league average, 24% above league average on the cutter as well. Mind you, it was in a very limited sample size, but he has a funky delivery with a short arm slot, and he's certainly an intriguing option for the Mets to consider that they can call upon from AAA at any point, because that's where he's going to be starting with the Mets here. But enter him, Shintaro Fujinami, who did clear after the Mets DFA'd him. They just did that for roster room with his $3.5 million contract. They knew no one would pick up. They still have some nice internal, exciting high upside with some risk options there in AAA. And Zuber is the latest example of exactly that. And between him and Jackie Bradley Jr., give me all the Long Island Ducks this year, because that feels like it's the trend right now. And I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't think it is.
I was going to say, there's a guy late in the season to watch. I know he hasn't done a lot, but he's got 2 homers. He threw out a guy yesterday. I'd like Jackie Bradley Jr. over Ben Gamel. I think defensively he's great, and a pinch runner late in games. Veteran, won a championship, has been an all-star, been a Gold Glove. Ben Gamel hasn't really played much, but I could see down the pipeline maybe JBJ having a final spot, but we'll see. Starling Marte is on his way back. Marte will rehab. He'll join the team over the weekend in LA, then rehab next week in Port St. Lucie, and then Binghamton later next week. So Starling Marte likely will be back by the Mets' next homestand after this 10-game trip. I'm glad they keep Fujinami. I want to see him at some point. I hope it's in games that matter. I think we're all just fascinated that he could throw 101, 102. The name, we love our Asian players. Kaz Matsui, Tsuyoshi Shinjo, and Mr. Koo are 2 of my all-time favorite Mets. Mr. Koo hitting a double off Randy Johnson and scoring with a jacket on, with a ball in his back pocket. Tsuyoshi Shinjo, I'm at the game, sliding into first, getting hurt, leading to a Mike Piazza 2-run walk-off homer at Shea Stadium. We love Tsuyoshi Shinjo, and then he gets a massive walk-up in Japan as he's a manager, like he's the president of Japan. It's Bobby V.
The boss.
Bobby V and Tsuyoshi Shinjo will never pay for a drink, a meal, or anything. Their rent is probably free in Japan. Shinjo, Bobby V, 2 Mets greats, and those are stories. Kaz Matsui, don't Google him. Have your safe search off if you Google Kaz Matsui. If you do it after midnight, be careful. It's a gimme a man after midnight. Puts a new meaning to Kaz Matsui. If you've searched that, you know what I mean. Anyways, this is the Sick Podcast, Mets Magic. Sick indeed.
That was great, Jake. That's exactly the kind of quick transition I usually do with saying stuff. So that was good.
Hey, Wardy NYM, Jake Brown Radio. Make sure you smash that thumbs up. Don't smash the thumbs up too far. Kaz Matsui might like it. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, I've lost my mind. This is what with Figgy, I would just go off the deep end and he would have to reel me in. So I can't even swim, so I can't go too far down the deep end. We stay at the smaller side of the pool. But anyways, Ryan Stanek, the other reliever the Mets get for Rylan Thomas. Now, Ryan Stanek is an interesting piece here, Wardy, because along with Phil Maton, has experience, won a World Series, was teammates with Uncle Phil in 2022, put up good postseason numbers. 2022, this was the best reliever in the sport with a 1.15 ERA. This year, he's due for an uphill. He's due for an uphill climb here. He's not having his best season. He's got over 4 ERA. He looks like he should be in Duck Dynasty. He's got to look like you don't know where he was hunting the night before. What's going on? He drinks a lot of Budweisers potentially, but he has postseason experience. He's been a winner. He's had success for a championship team, and I think that's kind of an X factor that you find out David Stearns looks for in his guys. Looking at Iglesias, a guy with winning experience and a pedigree. He looks for these winning kind of players who have kind of a story to write for themselves. And Stanek is that kind of guy. I feel like he can only go up from here. Unfortunately, his first outing was dreadful. Had a better outing the other day, not giving up a run. But what do you think about Stanek? I like the move. You didn't give up a lot to get him, and I'm going off career pedigree and the fact that he has a championship. I feel like the Mets could be a good fit for him.
Yeah, Stanek is a guy that I want a lot in the offseason. So was the case with Maton. It's kind of crazy how months later the Mets landed them both via trade and not in the free agent market, because David Stearns was active too. But something I'm sure you probably remember is that the market was fairly expensive, even for, mid-relief options this past offseason. The Mets were fairly stubborn in their spending for justified reasons at the time. So Stanek signs with Seattle. Maton goes to Tampa. And stay on the topic of Stanek here. He had an up-down year with the Mariners, just didn't really adjust. In the month of July, he was not good for them whatsoever. There was even one outing where he literally walked everyone their mother. So that's saying that I say a lot. He actually did, sadly. And the Mets were able to get him on the low because of that. But let's not forget how good Stanek can be as long as he's comfortable. Every reliever goes through ebbs and flows every single season. You just need to hope that when you acquire a guy that you get a good solid sample size for that stretch that you want them for. That's really the big focus here with Stanek. And he touches, again, high 90s on the gun. He sits 98, so he's touching 99, 100 for sure. He's in the 97th percentile Major League Baseball in that regard, 88th in chase percentage, 87th in whip percentage. He struggled to give up soft contact this year. He's been barreled hard because of that reason. But Stanek, what I love so much about him is not only, the four-seam, split finger, slider, and sinker mix he has, but it's the moxie. That we've seen the Mets get stomped on so much in recent years, whether it's being the team that's leaned the way and hit by pitches in 2022, feeling the same way a year later as well, or if it's just them when they've had the little brawls, in hand with that, with Pete Alonso and St. Louis Cardinals, just to name a few. It feels like the Mets haven't had a lot of personalities in this clubhouse that could really step up and lead the way for the team in that regard. And Stanek is the guy who takes no nonsense, no BS from nobody. If you look up his highlights, you'll see a montage of not only him pitching great, and also a montage of him either being ejected from ball games, letting everyone know about it, or potentially starting a fight. So that's what I love about Stanek. He has moxie. He's going to tell you how it is. And that is the kind of thing you want come playoff time, because he has a 2.2 career playoff year rate over 20 innings. Phil Maton has is 0.83, I believe. So exactly what you want in playoff performers. So again, if they're going to be wishy-washy throughout the season, so be it, as long as it's not the demise for the Mets and winning ball games. Like Stanek, let's just make sure that you're not consistently blowing outings for us like Jake Diekman was and Adam Ottavino was for a good stretch, and we're going to be perfectly fine.
Yeah, you wonder if Adam Ottavino is the next man to go. He's pitched a little bit better of lately. He's that last guy. You move Stewart down, DJ Stewart gone. You got rid of Jake Diekman. You got rid of Adrian Hauser. You got rid of the kind of these stray pieces that were causing us headaches and losing games to the Mets. And you revamped it with winners and, like you said, fierce competitors. He's a fierce competitor. So is a Jose Butto. So is a Daniel Nunez. You see when they strike out a guy or get out of innings, the excitement that they have. And I think that's what you need come postseason playoff push, come playoff time. You need guys with that electricity. We see it from Edwin Diaz. If he's struggling and then gets out of inning, we see how excited he gets. You need those fierce competitors. You need those winners down the stretch. And, the Mets have gotten a lot from those guys that nobody expected, like a Butto and Nunez. But that might not last all season. That they might have a time where the league catches up to them, like they did with Reed Garrett. Reed Garrett was dominant for April. The league caught up with him, and he imploded. Now you have guys who, over the long stretch of a season, have had success in the big leagues that know what it takes in August and September and into October to have your arm, your health, your body, your mind right for that long push. And I think those are the X factors that someone like Stearns finds. And Stearns went into this season, Wardy, with a bullpen that we thought could be either sneaky good or sneaky terrible. They ended up being sneaky terrible for the most part. And a lot of that was Edwin Diaz, hurt, the suspension, sticky stuff, him not being as effective. The trickle-down effect was massive. But over the course of the last month, he has turned what was the team's biggest weakness. I'm not sure I'll say a strength, but I'll say a lot better than what it was a few weeks ago. That started with Maton. It was added with Stanek. It was really added with Brazoban. And I guess you can call it in somewhat of a strength. This bullpen is better than a lot of bullpens in baseball. When Edwin Diaz at his best, when everyone's back, when Reed Foley, who led the team with a 1.63 ERA, comes back, this bullpen is a lot better than a lot of these teams in the playoff push.
Oh, yeah. This bullpen definitely has me excited. I have some concern level, more so just on the lack of experience with some of them, and the Nunez's and the Garretts and the SRFs. How do they handle high leverage down the stretch when we're really in a dogfight? Because we are right now. Every single game's important. One Mets loss, even being 7-3, just pushed them out of a wild card spot by half a game. So that's what we're dealing with this heated wild card race right now. And that's why I'm looking at those more inexperienced start right-handers that have blossomed this year, and all the three that we just mentioned. I hope that we continue to get that positive production from them. But thankfully for the Mets, they at least have some options to turn to that have shown more reliability, and guys that have been there and have done that we have mentioned to a degree, and not only Diaz, but to a lesser degree in Stanek, Maton, among others. Adam Ottavino has been a playoff performer up and down, but he's one of those guys where it wouldn't shock me if the Mets do box him out, because again, with how the bullpen configuration is at the moment, it is not going to be one of those things where David Stern sits on his hands if, say, there's one guy that clearly is sticking out when you know you have a better option that just got back from injury, or you know you have a better option in the minor leagues, because this is the same David Stearns that found Reed Garrett and found Danel Nunez when no one else was paying attention. More so Nunez than anyone else. Garrett, that's actually a Billy Epler design, believe it or not, because Epler traded for him last summer when he was dominating with the Orioles in minor leagues. So Epler knew there was something there with Reed Garrett. We just didn't know really to what degree at the MLB level, and we've seen that this year as he's changed his arsenal a bit. But in the case of Nunez, a 28-year-old right-hander that was exposed in the Rule 5 years ago by the Mets, was actually picked up by the Giants, but then dropped. So the Mets got him back for that reason. And he's literally Edwin Diaz light, sits high 90s, 98, 99, has a nasty slider too that sits high 80s. So yeah, for those guys, you just got to hope that they continue to be consistent the way that we've seen from both Nunez and, to a certain degree, Reed Garrett when he's healthy, not being overworked.
Nunez on the way, Garrett on the way back. You have Zuber now on the pipeline in AAA if they need him. You got Fujinami if they need him. If Bryce Montes de Oga could ever find his command, you have him way down the road if you need him. You are stacking the chips if anyone goes down to quickly replace them. The Mets' weakness, you could say, is lefty. And I feel like lefty relievers aren't as essential as they used to be. If you're not coming in the middle of the inning, you got to face three batters. They got the Young and Young, the law firm, Alex Young, Danny Young. They've been okay. We'll see if they both. I feel like one of them is going to not make the cut once these guys come back. Maybe they're both gone and the Mets just go with a non-lefty bullpen. I don't think that's the end of the world, Wardy, not having a lefty. Would you agree?
Yeah, I don't think it's the end of the world at all, because you don't need a lefty to get lefties out. That's a fallacy that some people or even teams have, because David Robertson is a great example of a guy that for the past 10 plus years has gotten lefties out better than a lot of relievers in Major League Baseball. So no, you don't need to have a guaranteed, a dominant lefty in your pen. Would you like it? Absolutely. That's why Tanner Scott was such a sexy, flashy name and idea for the Mets to acquire, not only because he's a lefty, but because of how hard he throws. That's the big thing. The Mets have a bunch of lefties right now, but after cutting Jake Diekman, rightfully so, they have more soft tossers than anything. You're not getting crazy velocity in Danny Young. You won't get that in Alex Young. Matt Gage, similar, has some more velo there, I believe. But again, nothing crazy. So the Mets will be reliant on their current lefty options to have more of their pinpoint accuracy with their soft tossing, and also for some of them really get those lefty-lefty matchups to bite, whether it's that sweeper down and away, back foot, whatever it's going to be. So yeah, I'm interested to see how things are going to go with the lefty relievers the Mets have now that they've officially cut ties with Jake Diekman.
And, how that affects the starting pitching, they don't have that depth in the minors, the starters. They have Brandon Sproat in AA. Does he, if they need him, get a chance? He's been dominant, but I don't know if he's going to go AA, make a start to AAA, and then be here. The other guys have struggled. Hamill, Vazel, however you say his damn name, Luke Casey, Tidwell, have all struggled in AAA. So they don't have any starters. So if there is an injury or two, you might see a Budo. You might see McGill make a spot start. You may see a few bullpen games. They have a good enough bullpen where if they have to do a bullpen game and go Tampa Bay Rays style, they will do it. It's not the greatest thing, but they will do it. But that's not something we got to worry about now. Last one on the list, because we didn't even mention him, was a guy that waved goodbye to Mets fans in a Reds uniform. He waved goodbye after making a sliding catch to win the game. A day or two later, I was there. I was behind the dugout waving goodbye to him when he got tossed out of the game for arguing balls and strikes in a Reds uniform. He is now a Met, and that is Jesse Winker. And I was out Saturday night with our guy, Giraffe Neck Mark. We were in Astoria at a bar. He was having a Miller High Life. I was having a White Claw, like the white girl I am.
Wow, he wasn't drinking Coors. That's a first.
Yeah, I think it was a Miller High Life kind of bar we were at in Astoria.
Okay.
The Diddy, shout out to the Diddy. My friend is the owner, so we love the Diddy in Astoria. And we were looking at our phone, bang, the move happened. We did like 3 cheers. We were hyped. This was Jesse Winker. Like, this was the bat we needed. A left-hand bat having a really good year, a 374 OBP. He walks. He's DJ Stewart on crack. He has the power that DJ Stewart we thought he could show at times. He walks like DJ Stewart. He steals bases for the first time in his career. He's got 14 steals. Never stole more than 1 or 2 bases in a year in his life. 101 games. Jesse Winker, interesting piece. Hasn't played a lot of outfield this year. He'll mostly play right field when the Mets need him. JD Martinez is your DH, so that's going to be a spot. Not as good against lefties. When lefties come in, he might get pinch hit for. But Jesse Winker was an impact bat here that the Mets got for Tyler Stewart. He was their 23rd ranked prospect at the time. So, again, you did not give up a top 20 prospect, and you got an impact bat. The Mets offense was not their weakness, but they needed one more bat. They needed DJ Stewart off the roster, and Starling Marte's return makes this Mets outfield very deep, Morty.
Very deep. You got Brandon Nimmo, Harrison Bader, Tyrone Taylor, and then you have Starling Marte and Jesse Winker. That's huge because DJ Stewart was a liability enough in the corner outfield. So was Starling Marte. Let's give it a buck, right? Anyone in right field for the Mets, that's a platoon between Marte and Winker, is not going to be ideal on the defensive end, but you're willing to sacrifice that knowing what you're getting. And for Jesse, he's such a fascinating one because we all know the story. I'm going to just quickly recap it. 2019 Reds just dominating the Mets, waving with fans, having a great time, hitting bombs. Him and Jose Iglesias teeing off against Edwin Diaz's first year with the Mets. We all know how terrible that was. Even collecting signs from fans calling him the B word because he just doesn't care. He loves it so much. Comes back when he's with the Seattle Mariners. Mind you, was horrendous with the Mariners. Hits a 3-run tank in the series because, of course, he does. He says how much he loves Mets fans after that series. Mets get him after he hits that home run against Adrian Hauser to win it on 4th of July. It has come full circle. Jesse Winker is exactly what the Mets have been looking for in a lefty, somewhat power bat option off the bench, corner outfield / DH. JD, when they don't want him to start, so he needs an off day, especially if they're facing right-hand pitchers, which they will more often than not. That's where you enter Jesse Winker for that DH stint. Can slot nicely in that number 5, number 6 spot in that lineup, especially if you break up bats and Alonso, Vientos, or Alvarez, however you want to go about things. And the biggest takeaway for Jesse Winker, for me at least, is 3 things. It's 1, he wants to be here. He loves Mets fans, and that's a huge aspect of this. David Stearns had a point of emphasis heading into the season. We got to bring guys that want to be here, that know how to handle this market. Cannot say that enough. 2, you get a guy that for some reason knows how to steal bags now. He's not good on his speed. If you look at his sprint speed, he's actually still one of the slower guys in Major League Baseball. I don't know what Jesse Winker has figured out, but he's figured out something to get ahead on his jump to steal bags for the first time. A more athletic approach for him. And most importantly, unlike our guy in the Polar Bear, Pete Alonso this season, Jesse Winker has fantastic clutch numbers. High leverage, runners in scoring position, 2 outs with guys on, everything that you want, especially in a playoff performer against right-hand pitching, Jesse Winker gives you. So when you want a guy in a clutch situation, high leverage, we all know what Pete, it can be so Jekyll and Hyde with what you get. Jesse Winker, at least to this point this season, has definitely been more of a guaranteed thing. So that in itself is exciting, and that is why I love the pickup for David Stearns to do.
Yeah, and it, like you said, it gives you options. If there's a righty starting and he's the DH, you start him. Lefty comes to the game, you pinch it with JD Martinez. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And you need 1 through 26. You need every player to count. You need Jesse Winker to kind of be the Juan Uribe, Kelly Johnson duo that helped the Mets in 2015 down the stretch. So this was a lights out move. So, I give David Stearns a B+. I think he got a lot, didn't give up much. I think an A is too generous because they didn't get the most impactful pieces, but they got pieces to help them win. We'll close on trade deadline. What's your grade or overall recap of this deadline for David Stearns?
Grade is a B on what they got, and for what they gave up, it's easily an A+. That's how I feel, especially with how everyone else is spending. It feels really good seeing that, David wasn't really just dumpster diving the way that people think. If you just pay attention and understand the context, it made sense. The only thing I would have said is, man, I would have loved Eric Fetty. Eric Fetty's like the one guy that I think would have been really nice for this rotation that sadly the Mets couldn't pull off, and it needed a 3-team trade in order for it to happen with the Cardinals.
All right, I know you got to bounce in a minute. Let's just quickly talk about this West Coast trip. What are you looking forward to here? 10 games, all different time zones, 3 against the Angels, where Blackburn will make his debut Friday, Peterson, Quintana, 1 Cardinals, Manaea, 3 Rockies, 3 Mariners before they return home. A big trip against teams you really need to beat here, Wardy, because after this, the road only gets difficult. 22 of 35 teams over 500 once this 10-game trip is over. The road gets tough. I think you look for a 7-3 trip here, right?
You hope for a 7-3 trip. I am expecting in the 6-4 range. 5-5 is at the end of the world, no, but the Mets will not be in a playoff spot if they go 5-5. You can't be 500 in the next 10 games with how tight this wild card race has been. And it cannot be justified really either when you look at the strength of schedule right now. The Mets only play 4 games out of their next 10 games against teams that are good teams. They have that one against the Cardinals, which is such a joke. They got to fly without an off day or anything like that. One day in St. Louis, then they're back. And I think they go to Colorado afterwards. I could be wrong. And then you have Seattle to end everything. Yeah, definitely think 6-4, 7-3 would be very ideal for this team.
A big stretch ahead. Wardy will have you covered. You can subscribe to his YouTube at Wardy NYM. As well on Twitter. You can catch him doing some of those Bleacher Report live streams as well. How's fatherhood, by the way? How old's the baby? What's the baby? What's the size, name, everything?
The baby's name is Shay. So there you go. That's always the great thing. It's not just Mets fandom too. I've always been a huge name. There you go. See, you're repping my son's name every day. Love to see it, Jake. We love to hear it. Not only because of that, I've just always been a big fan of the name Shay. So it's fitting that it has that nice Mets connection the way it does. And right now he's a month and a half at the moment. So he's fantastic. Truly has been an angel. I'm very grateful that he, is not screaming his head off every single day or anything like that. He's been awesome.
Well, now you have a baby and a Mets to make you lose sleep. It's a killer combination, or make you a happy dad, as your
happy dad
says. Wardy, thanks for coming on Mets Magic.
Thank you so much, Jake. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the next one.
Yes, sir. Wardy NYM does a great job. He's going over to the Bleacher Report app to do a stream now. But, he recapped it well with me here. Like, this was an A+ in terms of what they gave up. None of these guys you might ever hear of again. Like, they might end up being good, but you're not going to say, damn it, why'd we trade him? And if they're good, great for them. But on paper, they gave away nothing and got better. And for me, this has got to be a 7-3 trip. Take 2 out of 3 against the Angels, 2 out of 3 against the Rockies, 2 out of 3 Mariners. And most importantly, win that game against the Cardinals, a team that's right on your necks. Win that one game. Sean Manaea, 11 Ks, 7 dominant innings the other night. They need another big start out of him. Severino, velocity was down, wasn't at his best. It was a stinker. He was due for that on Wednesday. And Jose Quintana was good on Monday, and the Mets just couldn't stop hitting. It was glorious to be there. 15 runs. Felt like you're at a football game. But August is here, and the playoff push has begun, and the Mets have set themselves up to be in the playoffs. Now, get it done. Starling Marte should be back by the next Mets homestand. Sean Reed-Foley might join the team on this West Coast trip at some point. Reed Garrett, same thing, or the homestand. Bodies are coming back and ready for the push. The question is, can they get there, and can they get Senga back for the playoffs? Because if you make it, he's here. This could be electric, but that's far down the road, and we'll address all that in the coming weeks right here. The Sick Podcast, Mets Magic. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. Give us that 5-star rating. Write a nice review. Smash that thumbs up below on YouTube, youtube.com/@the-sick-podcast, Mets Magic. Comment below your grades, your thoughts on the Mets deadline, and how you think the rest of this season plays out. And make sure you always catch Wardy NYM on YouTube. I'm Jake Brown at Jake Brown Radio. Subscribe to my YouTube. Follow me on social media as well. We appreciate you watching and listening to the Sick Podcast. Mets Magic. Until next week, let's go Mets.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Mets Magic on YouTube. Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.